always rather feel we should be allowed to clap, actually, but anyway. Yes. Students, college directors of music, chaplains, colleagues, fellow heads of house, Baroness Royal of Blaisdon, welcome to the Riverside Pavilion at St. Hilda's. And as you can see, we've turned on the weather for you behind. So for a joint event with the former women's colleges, Lady Margaret Hall, Somerville, St. Hugh's, and St. Anne's, to celebrate International Women's Day that aspires to set our souls flying and yet is rooted in soil, while living sustainably and being connected in our lives. How better to do this than being connected and earthed in person and online through a joint choral concert of readings, poetry, music, and song with reference to ecology. And a very warm welcome to our listeners on YouTube too. We may recall that International Women's Day grew out of the labor strikes and the battles for suffrage in the United States in 1910. It spread to Europe in 1911, and so we're all celebrating today the courage and foresight of our founders that even preceded the birth of this day. They formed variously coalitions of radical Victorians, mainly women and their male allies, who, with intelligence, passion, and compassion, created opportunities for women to study in Oxford. Gradually, women joined men in the lecture halls and the labs, and then they fought for women to earn and be awarded degrees, even if Oxford was the second last university in Great Britain. My alma mater was the last, 28 years later. And this is why it's so important to celebrate this day every year. We, our colleges, share much that is special and much that is in common in aspiring to achieve equality for all women, including those who identify as women. And this is why our college ethos of excellence and equality is just so important. And as the battles go on today for survival, in saving the planet for future generations, which is at a much larger scale, and in making sure that every single person has food to eat and shelter, which is why I think the American suffragette slogan of bread for all and roses too is still memorable and apposite today. This event has been organized by our college chaplain and director of music, together with their peers from St. Anne's, St. Hugh's, Somerville, and Lady Margaret Hall. They've prepared a wonderful program of spoken word contributions by members of our colleges with choral music sung by the choirs. We've already had a wonderful demonstration of that, and selected poems set to music. St. Hilda's chaplain, Miriam, will bring the event to a close by reflecting on soul and soil before we join in singing A Rousing Jerusalem, the famous suffragette hymn that we all love. But beforehand, we will link ecology and women in science through reflections and poetry shared with us by our emeritus fellow and former tutor in biology, mycologist, Dr. Sarah Watkinson, who is eminently suited to talk about soul and particularly soil in respect of women in sustainable and connected lives. Dr. Watkinson, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Principal. I'm honored and delighted that you've invited me to draw out the connections between International Women's Day and St. Hilda's Green Feast. I want to share briefly some reflections from my personal perspective of a very long career in biological sciences at Oxford. Women's opportunities in the academic ecosystem have widened, even though, even today, for many excellent women, equality remains a work in progress. I struck lucky when I applied for a junior research fellowship here. I won't tell you when. Nobody would disagree that women have been discriminated against in the past in this university. I can't be the only person here who remembers when only 4 Oxford colleges besides St Hilda's admitted women. How great to see them represented here tonight. Welcome, Somerville, Lady Margaret Hall, St Hugh's, St Anne's. I'm going to tell you a story. It needs a little background from my own CV. Forgive me for this. As a biologist, I researched the connected networks of forest fungi that recycle wood in forests. Without these fungi, dead trees would just pile up. We wouldn't be here. Fungi can digest wood. Their tunneling threads find and deconstruct scattered fallen branches. One species, Serpula lacrimans, causes dry rot in buildings as it consumes damp timber and penetrates masonry. Back in 2005, I proposed it for whole genome sequencing by the Joint Genome Institute of America, JGI. Finding out how fungi process wood had attracted a lot of money from the American government as part of a program on renewable energy resources. In 2005, sequencing the whole genome of one species was still a major event. And as a result of my fungus being among those chosen, I subsequently found myself at a big and select genetics meeting in California. It concluded with a grand formal dinner. The doors opened to reveal many beautifully laid tables in a vast gilded hall, but no seating plan. I knew almost nobody. Confident young research groups, I must say mainly male and also a lot bigger than me, were going in from the bar to the bar, and they were locked in important conversations. These were people from all over the world meeting each other. I couldn't sit between them or break it up. Where should I sit? I chose an inconspicuous place at a half-occupied table in a corner. An unassuming elderly lady joined me. I guessed she might be the mother of one of the organizers. She spoke to me with surprising acumen and kindness. As she left at the end, she handed me her card. It showed me her name and a logo. Later, I looked her up. She was Rita Colwell. Colwell, now retired, is a legend. She was former director of the USA National Science Foundation, president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, holder of honorary degrees from 62 universities from all over the world. Her major achievement was discovering the environmental source of cholera outbreaks in coastal communities of rural Bangladesh. The source of an infection couldn't be found. They looked for it in the water, like they looked in London, Mr. Snow, Dr. Snow's, the pub, finding the pump. They couldn't find it in the human population. They couldn't find it in the water or anywhere in the environment. You couldn't see it with a microscope, and you couldn't grow it in culture. So where was it? So Colwell discovered that the Vibrio cholerae bacteria can lie dormant in seabed mud inside cells of plankton. There's a microscopic crustacea. The infected plankton multiply and get into drinking water when storms swirl up nutrients from seabed sediments. And these conditions could be detected remotely by satellite, helping to predict cholera outbreaks. An alert was possible when cholera was around, but what would you do then? Colwell perceived women as the agents of change. She arranged for the local women, the ones who cared for households and prepared meals, to be trained to filter their drinking water through the very fine mesh of the silk their saris were made of, folded 8 times, and it worked, took out the infected plankton. The fact that I had dismissed Colwell as a mother, and therefore not a scientist, was mortifying. All her life, Rita Colwell has campaigned for equality for women in science. She believes that science will benefit from more talent if more women are included, and she has said the best of 100% of the population must be better than the best of 50%. She has recorded her own experiences of the obstacles that still face women in science and recommendations for reform in her marvelous book. I recommend. It's called A Lab of One's Own, in reference to Virginia Woolf's feminist statement, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction," delivered in 1928 to the scholars of Girton and Newnham colleges in Cambridge. Colwell's life story is one of both determination and adaptability. Adaptability is key to success in ecosystems. Her book records the extraordinary difficulties she faced as a woman competing for promotion as an early career researcher in 1960s America. One head of department told her, "We don't waste fellowships on women." But she ultimately benefited from a series of junior attachments to different labs, learning the latest approach in new fields. For example, only the DNA-based identification methods she learned could have revealed and identified those cholera bacteria hidden inside dormant plankton. Nowadays, DNA sequences are an everyday tool in investigating the workings of whole ecosystems, the microbiomes of soil and water, the human gut, the skin. And Colwell also had the human understanding, the energy and breadth of vision to see those local Bangladeshi women as the key to preventing cholera. Change of gear. Soon after that meeting, I reached retirement age and so no longer had a lab. I decided to spend my pensioned years on something I thought at school I might have been good at, but had to give up when A-level choices deprived me of the chance to study humanities. I went to the Department of Continuing Education here, and I learned to write poetry. My first homework was to write a Petrarchan sonnet, a strict verse form with 14 lines, a set rhyming pattern, and a turn, a change of perspective about 2/3 of the way through. The turn is very important in the flow of ideas that makes a poem. Petrarch wrote love poems to his mistress Laura, lots of them. Love poetry was too big a leap for me. I flicked through the Journal of Current Biology for inspiration and found this fact: dung beetles navigate by starlight. Why must they navigate? They live on cattle dung. These beetles live on cattle dung in the African plains. They have to collect their cattle dung at night when it's cool and dark and roll it back to their burrows by the most direct route before the sun comes up and dries it out, too hard to eat. Here's the resulting sonnet. It's in the voice of a dung beetle. I track my treasure home on star beams, hide my finds in caverns, steer them clean away before I'm stranded in the clueless day with all my musky gleanings dull and dried. Straightness is all. The constellations guide my angled legs, the facets of each eye lock on to glimmers, sensed how? Who can say? The system works for me, I'm satisfied. I know those lines of light shine down for me, the dung deposited on dewy ground, a providence. Through moonless dark, I see, in multiple dimensions, beacons round, and every blessed night miraculously precipitates new turds for me to find. This poem, it was a success. To my amazement, it won a competition, and it was my first step into the welcoming world of poetry writing, which I commend to you. It turned out that what I was writing was science poetry, and poetry and science share a lot: wonder, curiosity, precision of utterance. St. Hilda supported me in this new career, as it has in my science life, supported me in running SciPo, a series of science poetry conferences, which has become the university Torch SciPo network. And it led to my being inaugural writer-in-residence at Wytham Woods, running poetry writing workshops about ecological research as a means of public engagement. It's been wonderful. I have to thank St. Hilda's, and in particular Georgina Paul, for making this possible, and so much of St. Hilda's kindly support from the Domestic Bursars Office, the Dining Hall, the JDP, Kitchens and Lodge. Thank you so much for your support for SciPo. This is what colleges can do. The dung beetle, an African scarab, is marvelously adapted to live on dung in dry savanna country. It perceives the world as made for it. Otherwise, how would everything have fitted his life so perfectly? The beetle species is evolved by adaptation and natural selection to the constraints of its environment. The individual has to work all night and eat dung, but being so well adapted, it sees the world as being marvelous and uniquely helpful to it. Humans, too, have evolved as part of nature. We're not lords of creation entitled to exploit and destroy other creatures. We depend on the complex fabric of life. Somebody has said, our human economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of nature. Our meat eating is a problem for planetary metabolism. We have been filling the atmosphere with the warming blanket of ever-increasing carbon dioxide. Plants absorb carbon dioxide, animals emit it. We need to eat more plants, less meat. How lucky that we humans have evolved as omnivores, not predatory carnivores like cats. To finish with, I want to read you a poem which I hope you will find funny. It's called Postcard from the Cat. And please imagine your cat watching you pityingly as you enjoy your carnivorous dinner and then go out to do a spot of gardening. Postcard from the Cat. Of their many prostheses, the saddest of all are forks to correct clawlessness. So many, and so many different. Detachable, ranked by size, the smallest for pinning down food, detestable, pre-killed pap. I pity their soft bodies propped at tables, in their paws, unresponsive metal that will never retract, never clutch and tear with the whole arm's force, but instead turns weakly over into a mere scoop to push mush between their hairless lips and pointless teeth. They never drag in a bird fully feathered to eviscerate, each ripping off its own piece, but place it, plucked and too hot to lick, on a table, for the Tom to take a two-clawed carving fork and fussily dissect, first legs and wings, then breast. And neither of these dinner forks is any use to prepare a latrine. For that they use a garden fork. In a fastidious hand, turn and pat the earth, toss plants aside, but then, forgetting their purpose, fail to perform. Thank you. How marvelous to be here at St. Hilda's in 2023 with its new sustainability policy and to be about to enjoy the most delicious plant-based dinner, a beacon of plant-based cuisine. We need not just eat turnips. Thank you all for listening, and now enjoy the event.
As Director of College Music here at St. Hilda's, it's my great pleasure now to continue our celebrations with music. We celebrate International Women's Day. But rehearsing here this afternoon, I just couldn't help think that it's also a celebration of young musicians. So I'd like to thank all 60 of you here, not just choral singers, but instrumentalists too, for coming to help our celebrations. Thank you. They've all learned to love music and to share their talent. And given the announcement in the BBC yesterday that the BBC singers are being disbanded and 20% cuts in the orchestra, I just hope that some of you find your way into government, into education, into the arts, where policy can be affected, and you stop this happening. You fight for music, for excellence, for equality, and for accessibility to all. I hope some of you could do that in the future. Back in the past now, though, to the first piece of music that we know of to be published by a female composer. You're going to hear two pieces tonight from a collection by Raffaella Aliotti, who was a nun in Ferrara, and she wrote music for the convent in which she was cloistered. And as I said, she has the distinction of her music being the first known piece to be published by a female composer.
two settings of love poems by alumni of St Anne's College, R.V. Bailey and U.A. Fanthorpe, composed by myself and Alice Lang over there, with second year undergraduates.
Elizabeth Wordsworth was a seminal figure in the origins of education of women here at Oxford University, involved directly in the formation of my own college, Lady Margaret Hall, and of course St Hugh's, but also indirectly through some conflict with the foundation of Somerville. She led Lady Margaret Hall from its inception in 1878 until her retirement at the grand old age of 70 in 1909. And she wrote in her autobiography very warmly of her years at LMH and of the very many women who passed through her care and what they went on to achieve in their lives subsequently. If you read her book, she mentions an awful lot of childbirth, which seemed to have been a thing in late Victorian era, but also women who did amazing things both here in England and across the then British Empire. She wrote at the time of her retirement, reflecting on what she had learnt of those years, which had seen substantial change and many challenges. And she wrote in these following words, speaking of how women need to develop their own strength and character. So she wrote, looking back on the last 40 years, I ask myself, and perhaps others will ask, what is the chief moral to be gleaned from them? For within the last half century, we have seen how much independence has been won for and by women, not only in Europe and America, but in the East. Many of their own props have failed them. In the case of some, the natural instincts of marriage and motherhood have no outlet, and this very often through the force of circumstances and not through any fault of the individual. But from being metaphorically a crustacean woman, woman has become a vertebrate. She must have a backbone. I'm sure many of you recognize that need of, I see some people sitting up straight when I mention backbones. Now, for Elizabeth Wordsworth, with her own very strong faith, that backbone was at least in part formed by religious faith, though that in our own age has perhaps taken on lesser importance. But in all her writings, her emphasis on personal strength, on determination, on ambition. She writes of these things as backbone, and the need for that backbone remains as true today as it was in her own day.
This is a poem, If on Thine Eyes, written by Tahirih, a 19th century Iranian poetess and radical thinker. It's been translated from Farsi to English by Joshua Hall. If on Thine Eyes by Tahirih. If on thine eyes mine own should fall, two gazes fixed twixt thee and me, in revelation of it all, I'd speak of how I've yearned for thee. To see thy face whom I adore, the breeze's way have I deemed meet, blowing house to house, door unto door, down alleyway, street unto street. There flows, when I am not with thee, from these two eyes mine own heart's blood. Spring unto spring, sea unto sea, stream into stream, flood into flood. Those lips, so bud-like at their close, those locks, so perfume redolent, bloom unto bloom, rose unto rose, tulip to tulip, scent to scent. Thy brow, thine eye, thy fair cheek small, have all ensnared with subtle art my spirit's bird. Soul unto soul, love unto love, heart unto heart. Into the spirit's warp and weft, and into every thread thereof. This heart of mine, of joy bereft, hath weaved the fabric of thy love. Her own heart Tahirih perused, from page to page and fold to fold, and it with thee was so suffused that only thee could she behold.
Hello everyone. We're going to sing two contrasting songs about love. First up, a little bit more Aleopi, setting text from the biblical book, The Song of Songs, which is really more like love poetry on the lines we've just heard than anything liturgical or biblical.
Oh,
John is a man who has just spied what he describes as a creature, also known as a lady, on a hill far away, and he takes a bit of a shine to her. And so this next song contains not one but two proposals of marriage. And we're left at the end not really sure if she's saying yes or no.
On yonder hill there stands a creature, who she is I do not know. I'll go and court her for her beauty, she must answer yes or no. Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, no, no, no. My father was a Spanish captain, went to sea upon the go. First he kissed me, then he left me, bid me always answer no. Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, no, no. Oh, madam, in your face is beauty, on your lips red roses grow. Will you take me for your lover, madam? Answer yes or no. Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, madam, I will give you jewels, I will make you rich and free. I will kiss you silken dresses, madam, will you marry me? Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, madam, since you are so cruel, and that you do scorn me so, if I may not be your lover, madam, will you let me go? Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Then I will stay with you forever, if you is now see your mind. Madam, I have vowed to love you, would you have me change my mind? Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, hark, I hear the church bells ringing, will you come and be my wife? Oh, dear madam, have you settled to live single all your life? Oh, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, no, John, no.
That was lovely, wasn't it? As our celebration comes to an end, there's perhaps space for one more thought, I thought. The title of today's celebration is Soul and Soil. It comes from a book with the same title, written by the Quaker ecologist Alistair McIntosh, a man I hugely admire. Soul and Soil is a life-changing and world-changing book. In the book, Alistair McIntosh writes, "There must be more to life than for human beings to owe dignity, their claim to our sympathy, merely to their misfortune. The more Alistair writes about is the capacity to see a person's potential for blossoming, to see what they could be and maybe still can be, not just the limitations of what we presently are." The book, like our celebration today, is about that concern. It is about the earth, soil in a metaphorical sense, and people, which is soul. It is about the interrelationships between natural ecology, social community, and living connected lives. But the more is also about moving away from the mainstream trunk of Western culture and goes out on a limb where the blossom is. The more is about realizing that the mainstream manufactures people as a monoculture, tells us who a woman is and what a woman does and where a woman belongs. The mainstream trains people by pruning. It forces growth in standardized ways. Keeps blossom for beauty, not for growth. Following the mainstream, we forget that we too are an organism of the soil. We too need grounding. We too need blossoming. And to make blossoming possible, so Alistair writes, we must embrace our losses. We must face the reality of a brokenness of a heart that is both personal and of the world. And so we must remember what my favorite poet Adrian Rich once wrote. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age have, with no extraordinary power, reconstituted the world. Now please rise for a few moments of silence before we all sing together our last hymn.
Bon appetit for the green beans. Thank you.
There's a little fizz before that.
Some fizz, yes.
It's great to